just a bit of an upfront investment in determining your strategy, setting your plan, and organizing your trigger elements, you become fully armed with the ability to turbocharge everything you write, post, send, or say with the power of persuasion. Smart preparation means, as always, lining up tactics with strategy, making sure activities and details are adding up to the right big picture. One of the basic factors to consider when strategizing your persuasion campaign is by what form or method your trigger activations might take place. Although the majority of activation will happen in the context of written or verbal communication, not all human communication happens through words. Activities and behavior communicate things too, and consequently offer opportunities for influence. It doesn't have to be complicated or difficult, but the difference between taking a moment to checkbox your trigger opportunities in a situation to see what's possible and skipping that brief step is often the difference between deal and no deal. Let's look at an example of a persuasion campaign that was actually quite famously successful and which shows how emotional triggers can be deployed both strategically and tactically using multiple methods of activation. Ronald Reagan's well-documented triumph at the Geneva Conference of 1985 with Mikhail Gorbachev is often credited to the American president's personal diplomacy. But there was more to it than that. It was really nothing short of a masterclass in persuasion. And we can see quite readily how he activated a series of emotional triggers using both behavior and communication. It isn't well remembered today because of Reagan's eventual historic success over communism and the Soviet Union, but prior to this first encounter between the world leaders, expectations for détente were low, with predictions of an unequal contest between an often slow, doddering old Hollywood actor and a brilliant young political professional. At the time, Reagan was already renowned for his personal charm, but nobody thought this would work with Gorbachev. Reagan's reputation for using this approach was, of course, well known, so the Soviets also knew to expect it and not to be swayed by it. When the delegations were finally gathered around the table for the first time, Reagan held forth and proceeded to itemize everything the West thought was wrong with the Soviet approach. The atmosphere quickly grew tense as Reagan criticized a catalog of bad policies, poor practices, and harmful behaviors. Gorbachev grew visibly enraged, and Reagan's advisors were slack-jawed. Following an angry comment from the Soviet delegation about the U.S. president lecturing the Soviet leader, Reagan suggested he and Gorbachev should go for a walk. Suddenly, Reagan flipped the script. He turned on the charm. He spoke openly and exclusively on personal topics and was quite sincerely solicitous with Gorbachev. By the time they got back, the fate of Reagan's success was all but sealed. So what happened here? Reagan made what in persuasion terms we would call the emotional momentum sale. First, he highlighted the imposition of a threat or a problem using his grasp of details and history as an authority trigger. Only then did he seek to build comfort and trust on his walk with Gorbachev by activating the friendship trigger, and ultimately set out a vision for cooperation as a hope trigger. But Reagan's most successful trigger activation, which he achieved strategically and tactically using both behavior and communication, was arguably contrast. By starting off the meeting focused on problems, highlighting risks, and adopting a hard-line lecturing style, he set an adaptation level so that by the time he did get around to turning on the charm, it came as a surprise and made a real impact. Without the contrast teed up by the tenor of the first part of the conference, the well-known Reagan charm almost certainly would not have succeeded the way that it did.